All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are to everyone. I'm so excited today that I have a colleague who works with me at the prestigious JAMS, Judicial Arbitration Mediation Services. As you know, it is a premier collection of neutrals in the world that provide full-time neutral services, including mediation and arbitration, among other services. And the person who really took on mentorship for me when I joined JAMS is Shirish Gupta. Mr. Gupta has been with JAMS for little over 10 years, as a decade, and he has really made his name as a neutral with JAMS and has done tremendous progress over those 10 years and a wonderful provider of ADR services. Let's just say hi to him first. How are you, Suresh?
I'm good, Sukhsimranjit. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well. Thank you for meeting with me today. Um, Now, folks, you need to know that those of you who are law students or younger professionals in the area, some of you may think, "Oh, you're only going to become a mediator or arbitrator." There are some neutrals who do both, and among other things. And Mr. Gupta is one of them. He actually does both arbitrations and mediations. And we're going to talk about that today. How does he manage both different practices within his area of practice? But as you know, the topic for today, as you could see on the slide in the beginning, is this provocative topic, neutrality. And when I was teaching law, and I taught law for close to 19 years in different law schools in the country, always we had this debate, and some professors will spend hours on discussing how you should be neutral. What does neutrality mean to you? So I thought, let's ask a full-time professional, a neutral, especially with JAMS, Mr. Gupta, with great reputation. Mr. Gupta, why don't you tell us what does neutrality even mean to you before we get into is it even important or not important, and how do you manage it? What is neutrality?
First of all, I'm like, how is it provocative? Uh, I thought a basic premise of it is that we're neutral. Um, Now, everyone, or sorry, there probably are some common definitions of neutrality, and on the margins, people will view it differently. But at the end of the day, I don't have an interest in the outcome. And that's how I view neutrality first and foremost. Um, I have an interest in helping people. Um, so as we get through the questions, we'll get to some of the more edge cases. Like, for example, when you have a ZOPA that's not one point and you're doing a mediation, um, and if it doesn't resolve, I go home just fine. I maybe think that, it should have resolved, but uh, it's not my case.
Yes. The Thank you for that, Shirish. The reason it can become provocative is there was a recent publication which checked about, are we running too much towards neutrality in our ADR field, that we realize that there are places where we should not be neutral, that there should be events, there should be people. Dictators, for example, how can you be neutral towards dictators? I understand in the practice of ADR, you're saying we need to be neutral, but in life generally, right? Do we need to be neutral, or are we becoming too polite of a society? Some of us, if you may. So that was a discussion. That's where it is coming
Is
from.
our society really too polite?
Some segment of society,
Like
while
this is
the
the
other
last
segment is not.
bastion that should also join the not polite side.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the point of dictators and things like that. First of all, I haven't worked with dictators as far as I know.
Yes.
I've worked with many billionaires, um, uh, and I'm sure some people on one side are going to view uh, billionaires as having too much power. So I
Hmm.
can see power imbalances as a factor. I work with large multinational corporations regularly.
Hmm.
Um, you could argue that they have too much power. I take no position in that because at the end of the day, I need to connect with everybody in the room. Um, and if I'm coming at it from a position of judgment, in the sense of I don't like you for who you are, I may not like what you're doing. Um, like I may have issues with how you've litigated this or your demand letter, or the fact that you've asked for $5 billion when I think your case is worth zero. And I say that because I've recently done that case. Um, but at ultimately, I don't have power in that room other
Mhm.
than power of personality,
Mhm.
and the reputation and being the role that I have.
Mhm.
But we always get back to self-determination. It's
Mhm.
it's up to the parties at the end of the day to say yes or no to a deal. And if I'm unable to craft a deal that works for them, I'm going to get no's. If they think that I'm against them, I'm going to get a no. And I don't necessarily view, I don't use the term failed mediation. I've heard that term bandied about so much. I think that's just a misnomer as to what we're doing.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, it's the ability to connect with people
Mhm.
in order to get them to trust me and us to work collaboratively to get to a resolution.
Great,
Yeah.
great. You had earlier mentioned there are some areas within mediation, like you mentioned, thinking of the zone of possible agreements or perhaps breaking impasse. Tell us a little bit more about that. How do you manage neutrality when you are discussing that or exchanging offers or writing or giving mediator's proposal? I don't know if you do that.
I
Um,
do it. So I do a mediator's proposal. So I just spoke to a conference, and one of the issues that came up was mediator's proposals, and we went around the room talking about how big of a part of that our practice is. And I recently wrote an article about this, about how when I was trained, this is more than 15 years ago, I was trained in the facilitative model. And the idea there is you have the parties work the problem and they will go back and forth, back and forth. I'm not there necessarily to evaluate or to direct, instead, just to be a facilitator and help them along the way. And the, at least how I was trained was that process alone will help the parties moderate their views such that they should be able to reach settlement and for it to be a quote unquote positive process to them.
mhm.
So that way they feel like they feel satisfaction that they went through that. Um, my commentary on this panel and in this article was that's how I viewed it then. Having done the role and being in the mediator's chair for the last 15 years, I've evolved. And that nowadays, oftentimes I see the numbers back and forth in the trading. It can be valuable, especially to set anchors and expectations at the beginning. Unfortunately, they're often outsized expectations. Um, so that 40 bill, sorry, that $5 billion um, opening demand that I got, that one eventually settled for 40 million. Um, so it was a big drop.
Yep.
I routinely see them where the opening numbers are 100 times where the end point is.
Mhm.
It's not like it's necessarily two times or three times. Um, and so there's a view of from the parties that doing the numbers back and forth can be futile. Um, and why are we even doing this when we know that these are all just made up numbers? Um, so I'm much, much more comfortable doing a mediator's proposal. Um, I rarely do them at 10 a.m. if we start at 9 a.m., but I have done it and resolved it. Um, More likely, what happens is once the parties are open to it, we have frank discussions, and eventually I'll put a proposal down that I'm very much hoping resolves. That's a
Great.
long answer to three questions that were not asked, I'm sure.
No, no, no. This is great. Let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
What if you don't like a person? I'm not sure that has happened. A lawyer, a party. What if you develop, how do you go back to then your idea of being open and neutral and nothing to do with substance of the case. It just have to do with the strong personality or someone is being rude or whatever. A comment has been made. What do you do then?
So I remember early on there was one lawyer. who would basically just be yelling at me. Uh, and I'm like, what have I done that he's just yelling at me? And we continued having conversations, and then he mellowed out dramatically. And what it was is he was in a bad spot and
Mm,
he needed my help to get out of it. And he didn't know of another way to go about it. So he thought aggression would be the way to resolve. Um, and we were able to resolve it, but only after he dropped the aggression.
yeah.
Uh, and he was shown that like working with me is more likely to get you to a result. Um, I recently had one where one attorney told me, we're not going to talk about the merits today. Like, I don't, you can ask me whatever you want, but we're not going to answer any questions about the merits. So I tried working with them a little bit more. And I told them, look, if you're not able to convince me that the other side has a bad case, then I'm not going to be able to convince them. So what do you want me to do here? If your objective is for me just to take a number back and forth, I can do that. But I'm adding basically no value to this process. And in fact, it's probably undermining the process because when they when I go in the other room and they ask me, why should we pay this? I'm going to say it's because that's what they're asking for. And when they ask me to evaluate myself, I'm going to give them a truthful evaluation. I'm going to tell them I have not heard enough to warrant you paying that. Um,
Mm, mm,
so if I mean, here's the thing ultimately is that mediators are service providers, and there
mm,
are so many mediators out there. So
mm,
if the mediator that you want is someone that's just going to take your number to the other room and
mm,
that's it, there are plenty others to choose from.
mm, mm.
Um, and thankfully, I'm at the point in my career where I could say that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
when I was starting out, I'd take most everything,
yeah.
just because I needed the work and needed to develop my confidence and my skill set. Um, I don't see that as something I need to do anymore.
Tell us, how do you manage this mixed practice, if I may use that word, or diverse
Yeah.
practice of both mediation and arbitration?
I don't really see them as being in conflict in any way, because when I'm serving as a mediator, um, I'm also being evaluative. This goes back to the whole facilitative, evaluative, directive, and
Yep.
transformative ideas. Um, um, but I've brought more and more evaluation into my mediation practice.
Mm,
Similarly, in my arbitration practice, I bring more of my mediation skills because when we're discussing how many depositions do you need, then I'm mediating that discussion. Uh, I I have like motions to compel. Before I rule on it, I hear the argument, and then we start exploring what's the possible decision or option set. Um, and so I see those skills as very much complementary. Um, in terms of scheduling and calendars, that can be a little bit more difficult. With arbitration, for example, if I get an arbitration today, we'll do the initial call maybe in a month, set the arbitration hearing. Most lawyers aren't ready with it before a year. So sitting here today, I generally know which arbitrations I'm doing next year.
mm.
So I have my weeks already filled out of, okay, this week is that, or these 2 days are that. So that's already set. And then I work my mediations around it. Uh, Difficulty becomes like if I'm doing an arbitration in New York on the first week of March, then that means I can't mediate in California that week. Um, but that's, you deal with that.
It's a good problem to have. So you, Shirish Gupta, must be doing all kinds of cases. I looked at your bio today. I see employment, commercial, class action, you name it. There must be something that is your favorite. There must be something like, oh yes, I'm mediating this today or something. Is there a case or sorry, subject matter that you enjoy the most, or have you convinced yourself you like everything?
For me, it's about people.
Mm,
It's n not really the subject matter necessarily.
mm,
Um, so I'll just give you an example. Last week, I had a matter that had patents and copyrights and breach of contract in it. I had another matter that was um, a probably nine-figure acquisition gone bad. I had consumer class actions, um, and they're all just so different.
mm,
And I like the variety.
mm,
Back when I was a litigator, I didn't specialize. I was a generalist litigator. It's an old school concept, but the firms I worked at allowed me to do that. So I did securities litigation, I did employment litigation, I did consumer class actions, I did antitrust. I mean, there's so many different areas that I did. Um, and I thought that actually made me better because I saw commonalities. The arguments that I see a defendant make in a ADA access case are the
mm.
exact same arguments that I see someone making in other statutory cases. So, for example, patent infringement, when it's an
Yeah,
NPE on the other side.
yeah,
Yeah. And so
amazing.
you see the same issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good, very, very good perspective. Let me ask you about when you are when you're thinking of new practitioners entering the field, what advice would you have for them? Going back to the idea of struggle, I was really appreciative of the fact you mentioned in the beginning of your career, you had a different take in some of these cases than you have it now. You're more privileged, you're more set, and it may be a good advice, but I don't want to solicit that from you. I'm just asking open-endedly. What would you say to someone who is litigating for 5 years, 7 years now, or 10 years, thinking, hey, I should really try to go into mediation full time or at least substantial time of my life? How would you guide them to look into the field and even test if they're good at it?
It was interesting you said 10 years because that's when I got trained as a mediator,
Hmm.
is when I was out of law school for 10 years. Um,
And I do think you need some time after law school instead of I've been guiding students who say, "Hey, I'm out for last year. I become full-time mediator now?" Yes.
yeah, I see that. And also I see it with LLMs who have been doing arbitration in their home countries and then come here and say, I'd like to do arbitration here. And I'm like, good luck to you.
Yeah.
This is a very different environment. Um, so um, my general advice is get the judgment and the skill set as a lawyer first, so that way you can relate to other lawyers because that's who we primarily deal with in the types of cases I get. I'm not doing community mediations, so that's a different world. And I don't think I'd necessarily be the best person to do those. So, and I readily acknowledge that. So the advice, um, get trained, do the 40-hour course. Um, you need as many opportunities to be in that mediator chair as possible. So that way you just determine if you like it, to see if what your skill sets are and develop those skill sets. Um, Before I did the jump, I talked to so many lawyers and mediators, like, is this something I should do? Um, so I remember like driving for an hour and a half just to have a 1 hour lunch with somebody. And that was 1 hour and a half each way because I needed to do the research. And I met with a few people, and there's this one guy I recall, he said that he's a lawyer. He did mediation for 5 years, and it didn't take. Like he couldn't get the traction on the business side, and then eventually came back to just doing law full time.
Hmm.
Um, and I thought that it's good to meet people that it's like the idea of, 90% of small businesses fail.
Mhm.
Um, and if you just interview the 10%, you're going to have a very distorted view of what this is. Um, so I'm a little bit candid to the point of being brutal to people of this is such a hard space.
Yeah.
We talk about the legal spaces being so impacted. The mediator space, especially at this time, is even more so. And I'll give you the reasons. One, and I wrote an article about this like I want to say 8 years ago or something about the baby boomer wave is coming. What you have is so many lawyers from the baby boom generation who do not wish to give up the practice completely. So they
Hmm.
think, okay, I'm not going to be a lawyer, but maybe I could be a mediator. And I already have my retirement funds. So
Yes.
this isn't the money maker. I just need something to keep my mind sharp and my skill sharp. So you have that cohort. And then you have all the neutrals that were already there. And most of the neutrals that I see outside of, say, jams, they're either practicing law, they're doing trainings, um, or they're doing something completely separate. Like I know a mediator that's also a real estate agent. Um, and you see mediators are also therapists. So it's mediation or ADR is not their full-time profession or job.
Yeah.
Um, so it, it's just very competitive. Uh,
Yeah.
and then if I could add one more,
Please. Yeah.
yeah, the other thing is that attorneys are very set in their ways. So when I was at the law, big law firm days, I have vivid memories of the partners telling me, um, like, see if one of these five mediators is available. And it was always the same five. It there wasn't anything of like, oh, let's try somebody new this time. Or I met this someone at an event. Let's see if they're available. Wasn't like that at all. It was just these five year after year after year. Didn't matter what their price was. It didn't matter what their settlement rate was. It was just that reputation carried over. Um, and so that was illuminating to me of I need to do whatever I can to get on a short list. And sorry, when I say whatever I can, I mean I need to hustle. I need to write, I need to speak, I need to meet people, I need to have the marketplace think that I'm credible enough so that way I'm on short lists. And then I got a shot. Um, when I was very starting first out, one of my things was I was getting on panels throughout the state of California. So bar association panels, court panels, attorney fee arbitration panels, whatever I could. Um, and one organizer of a panel was candid with me, and I really appreciated this. They said, look, we have 200 people already on our panel. Of those 200, maybe 20 people or 10% actually get cases.
Any concluding thoughts for those who are in the practice or still mediating or not mediating or arbitrating? Anything you think you left out while we were having this Q&A?
And one of the things I did when I started was I shadowed people.
Hmm.
And so neutrals will
Hmm.
often allow you to sit in on their sessions. And I do remember that you sat in on one of my arbitrations,
I did, yes.
which
Very
it,
important and prestigious arbitration, let's say that. Yes.
no, it to some degree it's kind of like when you sit in court and you just watch the judge
Mhm.
like do the proceedings. Sometimes it's very boring. It's just procedural and boring, and I can understand that, and I appreciate you sitting through those times. Um, but it's important to see how the process goes. And if you
Mhm.
get to shadow a mediator, one of the things that they'll often do is they'll take you to side rooms and be like, okay, what did you see? What questions do you have? And so you engage in the why and how. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's not something that the parties get to see.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, this is Shirish Gupta with his amazing, sound, wise, direct, as you said, at times brutal advice. So thank you, Shirish, for your time today. This was truly helpful. And I know people who will be listening who think let's just become neutral and work will flow. We'll listen to your advice with a lot of thankfulness and say, okay, this is not that easy either. Um,
I'm not here to scare anyone.
I
If
don't know.
people,
That's where my conclusion was. At the same time, if they look at people like you and me and saying if guys with these names and backgrounds somehow can also get business, that means I do have a hope. And even though you and I have very different, no comparison to you, but life backgrounds, and but looking at the idea of what America provides, what this country provides, and nothing is impossible, is what I believe. If you put the hard work, as you said, hustle, and you put your ducks in the row, but do not have an unrealistic expectation, is what I'm hearing from you, that this is how it's going to be right after the law school and all of that.
yeah. Well,
Thank you.
thank you for having me here.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, to everyone. I'm so excited today that I have a colleague who works with me at the prestigious JAMS, Judicial Arbitration Mediation Services. As you know, it is